How do you go from starting a nonprofit in someone's living room to this? I'm talking 2 warehouses, volunteers coming in every day and serving thousands of kids every single year. In this nonprofit founder to full-time profile, we're going to be talking to my friend Dallas, the executive director of Note in the Pocket, an organization with a mission of getting clothing to kids who need it. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Amber Melanie Smith, nonprofit founder, social entrepreneur, and social impact YouTuber who makes videos all about nonprofits, fundraising, and how you can make a social impact in your community. As always, I hope you find this video interesting and helpful. Don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more content like this. And check out my website, CHANGEMAKERcafe.com, where I have more resources available to you to help you along your change-making journey. All right, let's go talk to my friend Dallas. So I must have met you 10, 11, 12 years ago?
Yes, about 11 years ago.
I have just loved seeing Dallas's journey from basically nothing up to now in this gorgeous, gorgeous space. And I would just love to have you tell people more about what that journey has been like, because we have people starting nonprofits who are watching this content and need sort of a real life behind the scenes glimpse.
Sure. Well, Note in the Pocket is a program that provides quality clothing to homeless and impoverished children and families. It started out of as a family ministry and grew into our organization. The organization is 11 years old, and we're clothing 10,000 people a year.
10,000 people a year. And Note in the Pocket, that's a pretty interesting name. How did you come up with that?
Okay, so the family that started Note in the Pocket, the husband and wife taught their children we were born to serve. So we'll volunteer where church tells us to, where school tells us to, but as a family, when we identify a need, we're going to do something about it. So the oldest daughter, Margaret, always wanted to teach in a school that needed her most. Got her wish, graduated from college, started teaching kindergarten in a Title I school where free and reduced lunch was around 95%.
Wow.
So her little kindergartners came in, and they didn't have the same first day experience that Margaret did. They didn't have a first day of school outfit. They didn't have new backpack and lunchbox, and many were hungry, some were homeless or close to it. And Margaret calls her mom and she said, "How do I teach these children? They're not prepared to learn." And Susan said, "We can't fix everything, but we can do something. Pay attention." So it started getting cooler, and the kids were wearing the same threadbare summer clothes, and they were chilly. Margaret calls her mom and said, "These children are cold." Susan, without saying anything, just started collecting coats from friends and neighbors and family. The day came, each child in that class received a warm coat. And it was the most excitement that they had seen out of these children since day one. They were so excited. They wore those coats home that day. And the next day, half of those coats were returned because the families couldn't believe anybody would give their child a coat. So they put a note in the pocket that said, "This coat is your child's to keep. It's a gift from the community." So we say that Note in the Pocket is the community. The community donates the clothing. They come and volunteer with us to help us provide the clothing, and then they support us financially. So Note in the Pocket is 99% volunteer powered, and they support us in all of the ways. We quickly learned children need more than a coat, but that's how we got started.
I love that. And in past videos and in past interviews of nonprofit founders, we talk about how did they identify the need, right? We talk about this importance of market research before you start an organization, really getting a sense of what those needs in the community are. So I think your story really hits on that, being proximate to directly with the people who have the need.
Sure.
What else would you say about learning about what the community needs if you had to give advice to other nonprofit founders on how to approach that?
No, absolutely. Well, I started out as a volunteer. So this was a family ministry for 7 years. And I was volunteering, bringing donations, helping to process the donations so they could go out, because we're now providing all clothes, shoes, underwear, all of the things. So as a volunteer, I had done a clothing drive with my son's Cub Scout troop, and we had 17 lawn-sized bags of clothes that I took to Susan's house. And I'm like, this will take them months to distribute. 3 days. Those clothes were gone in 3 days, and I couldn't wrap my head around that, because we live in a very affluent part of the state, and that there was that much need. So I started doing some research, and at the time in the Wake County Public School System, there were 48,881 students in our school district identified as living in poverty. So that night, it was a very cold, rainy night, and I woke up and I could hear like the ice, the sleet hitting the windows and the deck, and I just started crying. And my husband said, "What are you crying about?" And I said, "Kids are going to wake up this morning, they're going to be standing at the bus stop, and they're going to be cold. They won't have coats, they won't have raincoats, they won't have warm shoes." And I couldn't stand it anymore. So I really then decided to help even more. But one of the first things that we did, because it was a family ministry and everyone kept saying you need to be a nonprofit. If you go to North Carolina Center for Nonprofits and it says you want to start a nonprofit, the first thing it tells you is don't.
Yeah, true story.
Find someone who's doing what you want to do and help them. So I started researching who's helping with clothing insecurity in North Carolina, anywhere, and we couldn't find anyone that was doing what we were doing. People would provide piecemeal. Here's a coat. If you need a pair of shoes, we can help you with that. But children need everything. So we really created a unique identification and delivery system, a donation and processing system that we haven't found really anywhere else in the country. There's people doing similar things, but not to as big a market. It's very specific. So we just kind of had to create the wheel, because there wasn't something that there wasn't someone else we could help.
You found a niche and you filled it.
We did, yeah.
Everyone who starts a nonprofit or gets into this work does so because they want to make a real difference. But sometimes it can be hard to know if you're making a real difference. That's why we talk about the importance of measuring your impacts and evaluating your programs as such a key component of nonprofit and social impact work. I'd love to hear a little bit more from you. We know that your mission involves distributing clothing to kids. Let's talk about, how do you measure the impact of that work, both in terms of the outputs, which is, if you're not familiar, the immediate deliverables of your work, right? So if you're a food bank, it might be the pounds of food distributed, compared to your longer term outcomes, which is basically how you changed your community from its status quo to now. So for a food bank, again, it might be less people are food insecure as a percentage, you know?
Sure.
So taking that comparison, how do you all measure your impacts?
We were really lucky. Back in 2012, we did an Activate Good program where we got a wonderful volunteer who came and helped us set all of this up. He said, "What are the type of things that you want to measure?" And we didn't know, and we figured it out. So we measure lots of things. We have clothing that is donated here. We measure the weight of that, and people say, "Why do you measure the weight of clothes?" So you can show the first year that we measured, we received 25,000 pounds of donated clothing. That was in 2013. In 2024, we received 365,000 pounds of donated clothing. Wow. That's why you track it.
That's like 15x.
Yes.
Wow.
It's like the weight of 50 school buses.
What a cool comparison.
Crazy. But that's why, so that you can show over the years, it shows the community support and how people are aware of what we're doing, and they're bought in. We track how many children and families that we serve, and how much they receive. There's even a financial component of what the donated clothes value are based on what the IRS says it is. So we have a financial value to be able to say that we've donated over $3 million worth of donated clothing to families in our community since we got our 501c3 in 2013.
So those are your immediate outputs, something you can track, right? And it's very tangible, right?
Yes.
Over the long term, you might think, well, if you give a child a coat, they're going to be warm that day, but we also know that it has more impacts beyond that, right?
Sure.
How do you measure those longer term or other types of impacts, those outcomes?
Most of it is from the stories, unfortunately, there's not a way to say that because somebody received clothes that years later they did better. But what we are able to see is we get immediate and long-term feedback from our school social workers that we work with and agency case managers who will say this, like this great story. There's a kid that hated school and he got clothes from Note in the Pocket, and the next day his mom said there was something different about him, and he was standing up taller and he was walking to the school bus, and she said, I didn't realize how tall he was because he never stood up straight. And then he came home that day and she said, how was school? And he went, I'm going to be a chef. And she said, well, where did that come from? And he said, I don't know, today was different. These children need a today is different moment.
Ooh.
And when that happens, you arrive at school and you feel comfortable and confident, then you're open to learning. You know, your whole world doesn't change, but you're able to tackle it better, and then able to have that opportunity of a good education that can open doors.
By the way, sidebar here, I don't know if you caught that, but if you're looking for marketing strategy, we talk about in some of my other videos the gap, right? So what is the transformation that you're promising your community? And what Dallas just said, kids need a today is different moment. I don't know if you had said that before or if you've rehearsed that, but that was a pretty amazing tagline. Yeah. So just something to think about when you're trying to talk about your own organization's impacts.
Yeah.
So I know through these interviews, and if you've been watching my channel for a while, you've probably seen in some of these founder interviews as well that people who come to this work literally come from all walks of life. I've met an advertising professional, teachers, social workers, etc. Tell me a little bit more about what were you doing before this and how did you come to this? I mean, we know a little bit about how you arrived at this mission,
sure.
But yeah.
Well, when I was in college, I couldn't decide what I wanted to be when I grew up. You know, part of me wanted to be a school social worker, and I was afraid I couldn't make ends meet. I also wanted to travel the world, so I ended up getting a Parks and Recreation Management degree. So I wanted to travel and tourism. I did end up working in South Carolina as a recreation director for a couple of years, which was so fun. I took 200 adults parasailing. It was awesome. Mm-hmm. There's lots of kid programming and adult programming. But when I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina, I had a variety of careers. Got married, we moved around a little bit, and when we got back, had kids, and I was really a professional volunteer. Volunteered at school and at church, wherever they needed me, and started some programs, and which was very similar to nonprofit work, just getting volunteers organized and doing whatever needed to be done. And then I started volunteering at Note in the Pocket. But I also, in college, worked with students who were in, they used to call them training schools. There were kids who gotten in trouble, who weren't living at home. It wasn't anything dangerous, but they came to the college where I went, and for a week, and they would come and take mini classes, and they would have lunch in the cafeteria, and they would see what a college experience was like. And never occurred to them before that they could go to college. Mm-hmm. But then once they were on the campus, they wanted it, and they had this desire. And I see Note in the Pocket is so much like that. The children that we serve don't see themselves as having a future beyond what they're living right now until they can see themselves having a future beyond that. And new clothing insecurity is something we're not talking about nationally. It's something that we're really, Note in the Pocket is really striving to get more recognized, because no one will argue with you when you say children need to be able to walk into a classroom and feel comfortable and confident to be successful. So that's how I got started in it.
And so you had some experience managing and mobilizing volunteers, which, mm-hmm. by the way, is a critical skill for anyone doing this work. Tell me a little bit more about what kinds of education or training you had either before or along the way that you feel like really equipped you for this work, and what do you recommend to others who are looking at leading a nonprofit too?
Oh, well, I have been really lucky with the boards that I have had. That believe that you need to invest in your leadership. So I've had a executive director coach from time to time. I've had organizational classes that I was able to take. In Raleigh, we're really lucky to have the Harvard 100 program, and was able to get some funding to take a class at Harvard. I got another grant, parlayed that into a couple more classes, and then got an executive certificate for nonprofit studies there.
What are some of the topics that those courses cover?
So performance measurement for nonprofits, then good stewardship of financial, and I should be able to rattle these off, and then one was community organizing, so which was fabulous.
Yeah, super important.
Yeah.
Let's get into some logistics about money, because this is something everyone wonders about when they're starting and growing a nonprofit, and for good reason. The money helps you do your mission. It's a requirement, right? So talk to me about, if you could think back to when you were starting and picture a pie chart appearing on the screen. What were your top expenses then? And then how did that evolve to now, when the current operation you have is quite larger than you used to have?
Yes.
So tell me about that.
So at the beginning, we were in Susan's house, and before we had our 501c3, we're putting our board together, and we told anyone who would listen, we need space, we need space, we need space. You have to have a place for clothing donations to come, to be able to process them, to organize them so they could be distributed, and that takes space. The more people you serve, the more space you need. And at the time, after we had outgrown the Rylands house, we were in a classroom, donated classroom, until school was getting ready, and then we were in another little borrowed space. Then I got a phone call from a local businessman who said, I understand you need space. How much do you think you need? And I said, I don't know why. I think we need 2,000 square feet. And he said, I've got 2,000 square feet you can use. You'll outgrow it before you can afford it. That is not a typical story, but the rule here is you got to tell everybody what you need. People have space they're not using. Be creative. I had one person tell me to look for churches that weren't doing well, because if they have space that is not being used for something else, and that would help the church, because you would bring volunteers there, and which I thought was hilarious, because am I supposed to drive around and find on Sunday looking for churches with limited cars in the parking lot? But it didn't work out that way. But it's that kind of mindset. Throw as much spaghetti against the wall as you can and see what sticks. So we had this donated space, and we were spending money on, we worked with Souls for Souls to get new clothes and shoes, and all we had to pay for was shipping. So that was an expense. It was really more program expense at the time. We were 100% volunteer run, and we had free space temporarily. It was really program. But then you needed to raise money. So because at some point, you needed a space of your own. So our first fundraiser was called Home by the Holidays. Aww. And it was to raise money so that when we did have to pay rent, we had it in the bank. So we had fundraising expenses, you had program expenses. And then at some point, once the board was like, we've got to pay a staff person and have them on the budget, because you grow from there. So when I was first paid, I was paid $12,000 a year, which was to get me on the books.
Big money.
So, that's everyone's dream. And so then I was in the budget, and that was our first budget.
And think about, though, the scale of the impact you're able to make when you invest in that infrastructure.
Exactly.
Are you able to tell me how many kids you served that first year out of Susan's house compared to now? I don't know how many square feet you have now in this beautiful space, but how many kids do you serve now?
So the first year that we had our 501c3 was 2013, and we served 1,553 people that first year. 1,500. Well, I tell you that because in 2013, 1,553. Last year in 2024, in October, we received 1,557 clothing requests.
Wow.
Big difference in what 10 years can make. So year 1, 1,553. Year 10 was 10,000 15 people that we had clothing requests come in for.
And that's just not possible unless you make those investments in your infrastructure and your personnel to be able to organize all of this work.
And there were multiple growth spurts. You know, we started in 2,000 square feet, and then 2,500, and then 5,000, and then just shy of 8, and then we got really lucky and moved in. We're now in 29,000 square feet.
Wow. I want to call out for a moment, if you've been watching these videos, if you've watched my interview with Amy over at Undies for Everyone or Michelle at the Diaper Bank, you might have heard a similar pattern here. When you are in a nonprofit model that distributes product, oftentimes those first expenses are the products, just the direct items, the programming, etc. But if you're going to actually scale your ability to distribute and reach thousands of more people, then you're talking professional staffing, warehouse, or some kind of space, right? So those administrative or infrastructure costs might go up, but then the impact is exponentially larger too. So you have to think of those two things as working in tandem.
And we have the space here in Raleigh for Wake County, but we opened our second location in January of this year, so we have a Durham County location as well, so we cover the Triangle in North Carolina.
From someone's house to 2 large locations in 2 of the biggest cities in the state.
Right.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So let's take a look now at the kind of money you need to bring in, the revenue side, the funding side, to cover all those expenses. Take me back in time to that first year. What were your top sources of revenue?
Then and now, it is community support. So we are heavily individual and local business supported. We have grant funding, which is great. It's easy to raise money for kids who need socks and underwear and jeans and coats. No one's going to argue with that. So for grants, we've done very well. But even then, it's not the largest income stream for us. It's the individuals, which is what I highly recommend everyone really concentrate on. The $1 million donations, those are few and far between if you ever see one of those in your lifetime. But if the community loves and supports what you're doing, then they're going to make sure that you're taken care of.
Do you know off the top of your head today, again, picturing that pie chart, what percent is individual donations, grants? Do you have an earned income model at all?
We do not. I mean, we have a little bit. We'll consign if somebody donates ski bibs, and that's not a school appropriate item, and we sell those for $10, $15, $20.
Right.
Then we will turn around and spend that on socks, underwear, jeans, items that our children need for school. Individual. The majority of our donations are from individuals and local. It's probably, and I don't want to say it wrong, but it's
ballpark.
Much smaller. 25% is grants.
Okay.
And then we have our Socks and Undie 5K Run Day and our gala, which is that's definitely less, maybe 30% of our income.
So I'm hearing about a quarter grants, 30%.
And also, don't quote me.
Oh yeah, these are not precise numbers. Just getting a general ballpark.
Sure.
A quarter-ish grants, a third-ish from events.
Yeah. And
so that leaves 40 to 50% individual.
Yeah, I think it's actually more than that. It's more than 50% that's the bulk of our income.
But we talk about this because every nonprofit is different, right? So you might have one organization whose model is very conducive to government contracts, and another that is a really good fit for program fees and earned income. But then, Dallas, her model is ideal for individual donations. So just knowing that one size does not fit all.
Right.
Hey, me again. I just want to take a minute to thank this video's sponsor, Click and Pledge. Click and Pledge is a comprehensive fundraising platform great for organizations ready to raise money and grow. Whether you're launching a nonprofit distribution hub like the Diaper Bank or the Food Bank or something totally different. Some of their robust fundraising features on their platform include text to give, where you can collect donations through text, peer-to-peer fundraising, where you can equip your own supporters to go out there and raise money on your behalf. A super cool special video fundraising tool that lets you collect donations right through a link embedded directly in the video so that you can know the exact timestamp of the video that inspired your donor to give. How cool is that? Personalized donor thank you videos and messages that can really drive up donor retention and encourage those donors to love your cause even more. And a ton of integrations for when you need to connect your fundraising platform to others like Salesforce. I've been doing this work a while and I've seen so many different fundraising platforms. I know that a lot of them will charge more and more as your organization's size and budget grows. Not Click and Pledge. Their pricing is going to remain consistent and the same no matter how much your organization grows. And it's all inclusive. There's no contract that you have to sign, and all of their solutions come with the platform at no additional cost. I'd love for you to try Click and Pledge for a free month. You can get a link to do that below this video. And if you want to learn more and actually talk to the humans behind the work at their team, you can schedule a demo. I'm going to leave a second link below for you to do that. Thanks again to Click and Pledge for sponsoring this video. A lot of people watching these videos are wondering, can they possibly do this full time, right? If this is work that you love and you're feeling really fulfilled by it, how can you make it your full-time career? So let's talk a little bit about staffing. I'm curious, you said your first salary when you were finally brought on as a paid executive director was $12,000.
Yeah.
About how many years did it take to get to the point where you could be that paid executive director?
It was about 2 years that I was volunteering and turning the family ministry into they turned it over to me. They said, we love the direction this is going in, but this wasn't our vision. It wasn't my vision either, to tell you the truth. The need just took over,
yeah.
And then we were all in. So the family still is heavily involved, and it just took on a life of its own. But it was about 2 years before we got our 501c3 and started, put me on the books.
All right, so a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And so just recapping, starting in someone's house, volunteer, unpaid executive director,
Mm-hmm.
fast forward to today, paid executive director, and how many other staff do you have?
So in this location, it's around 13, 14, and then our Durham location has 4 staff members.
So 17 to 18 staff across 2 large distribution locations. When someone is growing a nonprofit and they're wondering, well, how will I know if I'm ready to hire a paid executive director or hire paid staff? What are some of those indicators that you and your board thought through to know it was time?
Well, you have to research what fair market value is to pay people.
It's not $12,000.
It's not. There's also, we're very spoiled with, how many volunteers that we have. We have somebody who created our first website. Mm-hmm. Now, once you pay for a website, it's a lot better looking, as you have all of the quality bells and whistles, right? And you can pay for upgrades and things. But at the beginning, almost everything is done by volunteers. It's just how the natural progression. And I love my volunteers, but when you're volunteering, you don't have to show up every day if something comes up, but staff people do. So it's important to be able to have people that can guide your volunteers, or if it's financials, when you have a budget, you really need, the ED can't do it all. Mm-hmm. So you have to have somebody who's watching the books with you. You have to have people who are raising money with you. You have to have people who are in charge of programs with you. So the top spots, got our second staff person because I got a grant from a women's organization who said, you can't keep doing this by yourself. And as business women, we know it costs money to hire people. So yep. We had a grant that paid for our second person. They were then in our budget, and we were able to continue with them and then just start building. You put money in reserve. When you have money in reserve, that you've got a goal, and we had a goal to have other staff people. You have to have rent. You have to make sure you have your bases covered if something happens. It's just like a business. So.
If you're not familiar, reserve is like savings. Yes. It's like a little savings account for your nonprofit. And yes, nonprofits can and should have this, because you never know when something's going to happen. Even if you're just planning for the future and saving up to hire another staff position, right. if we have another global pandemic or some other crisis occurs, you need that protection of having some padding in your bank account too.
Exactly.
Let's talk a little bit about the board of directors, because this is a big category of questions I know I get from you all on the channel a lot. When you're first starting out, tell me about some of your approach to finding a great board, or your tips for others on how to find that first awesome board of directors.
Well, the first thing I did was talk to executive directors and other nonprofits and say, tell me what I need to know. And I was told, learn board speak. You know, if you're going to have a board of directors, you need to know how those meetings go and what the language is. My husband grew up in this city, and so I looked at him and I said, who are the smartest people you know? And so he said, you need this person on your board. So you also want to have a well-balanced board of not only people who know a lot of people in the community, but an accountant and an attorney, and a variety of skills, business and life skills, who can help you, your nonprofit be cohesive and grow, and a lot of connections. So it was we were trying to do that. Read every article I could get my hand on, did just a lot of research on how to build a quality board, and that's how I started.
And something you said just now about so that you can grow. That's something we've talked about before, is this idea of you want to put people on your board who are going to have the specific skill sets required to get you to your 2-year, 3-year goal, right? Because that's usually what about a board term is anyway. And so you need those people to be able to get you to that next milestone specifically. If your goal in the next 3 years is to have a huge marketing reach, then maybe you want to have more marketing people on your board, for example. All right, so fast forward, you're working with your board now, you're well established. What is your approach for effectively collaborating with your current board?
The most important thing is constant transparency. If they know what's happening, what's going on, and good, bad, and ugly, it's the reality. There's going to be times things that go wrong. There's going to be situations that happen. And as long as they feel there's an honesty and transparency about what's going on, then they're there to help, which is really what your board is here to do. And being very clear on how you need them to help. Even if it's just a board survey, what kind of things do you feel comfortable with? Is it are you good at fundraising? Can you bring people in for a tour? Is it, or you have great marketing skills? Are you good with events? Where do you want to participate? If you let any volunteer, but especially a board member, do what they love to do, and then they're going to do more than what you really expect.
I want you to go a little deeper with me on something you said a moment ago, which is about transparency. How does someone make the decision on what to share and what to not share? Because surely the board doesn't want to hear about every email you got that day, right? There's a line for their sake and for yours.
Sure.
How do you balance that?
I mean, yes, you only have a limited amount of time with them, but it's high level. If it's something that needs to be shared, we recently, the building that we're in had a transformer that was destroyed, which took the power out in the whole building. Wow. So we didn't have power for 3 weeks. And I kept them up to date on what was going on. I mean, obviously that's something they need to know. You don't want to see on the news that Note in the Pocket is closed for, has no power, and you're on the board and you didn't know about it first. Yeah. So always making sure that anything like that, so it's not the day-to-day. And that's the executive director's business of how to run the day-to-day. That's what they hire you for. But organizationally, things that are going to help or hinder, then they do need to know that.
Thinking about the sustainability of an organization, and you've been around a while, you might not be here forever, or maybe, well, I don't know.
What?
And this is hard as a founder, I get it, as also a founder who recently transitioned out of my role as executive director. You have to be thinking about the long-term lifespan of your organization. One day you might not be here. So tell me a little bit more about you and your board's approach working together to make sure that you could hire an amazing replacement. Not that anyone could replace you, but someone who could carry the mission forward that you'd be excited about.
Well, I will tell you, I have absolutely no intention of being here forever. But what I will also tell you is one day we will turn this over to somebody else. It'll be their turn and it'll be wonderful. So I feel like my job is to prepare Note in the Pocket to be ready to be handed over. And what the board and I have done is you're getting ready for that. For the last 2 years, that's really what's the board evaluation of an executive director, not of Dallas. It's how do we make sure that as we're looking for next year, 2 years, 3-year plan, is there a Note in the Pocket somewhere else? Do we go east or west? Then that as a board, as people are coming and going, that they understand what the planning is and what the expectations are, and if you adjust it at any stage, everyone's included. It's not, we have never been a one-person show here. It's very collaborative. So if someone wasn't here anymore, we would be okay.
And making sure, of course, that the executive director position is compensating at a competitive market value. Because if you were to leave one day, they would need to be able to attract talent to fill that role.
So it's very important, and I think we've done a good job of always, whether we're able to pay at that level or not, to know what fair market value is and what in the Triangle and in North Carolina, what different roles are being paid. So constantly trying to keep, and as you grow and your budget's getting bigger and bigger, it makes it even harder, but to make sure that our staff is being well paid and that benefits are being offered and that you're able to attract qualified candidates and then they stay. If you don't pay enough, you can't even attract the right people, much less have them stay for a long time.
And if you're wondering what is the market value for a certain nonprofit position in your community, there's lots of resources. You could use Candid. They have they do like an annual salary comparison from various roles. A center for nonprofits or a nonprofit association located in your state might have that data, or even just looking at Indeed or PayScale, or one of those other job sites can give you a sense of what it might be in your area too.
Those are good.
Yeah. All right, so getting to the home stretch here. Any final thoughts or final tips for people thinking about or currently starting a nonprofit?
It was never my aspiration to start a nonprofit. The term executive director is still very uncomfortable for me. I prefer chick in charge. But the need is here, and if you feel called to help, first I would see, is there somebody who's already doing it, and then help there, at least while you figure out how could we do this better. At Note in the Pocket, we say we're the best at getting better, and it's because we're not afraid to try something new. We're always asking somebody's opinion. Everybody's included in the decision making, and then we've grown to where we are today and have plans to help other people. We've created a how-to guide so other locations can start something similar to what we're doing, because it doesn't have to be a Note in the Pocket, but children everywhere need to be able to walk into a classroom feeling comfortable and confident because they have the right clothes and shoes and outerwear. And so we want that message to go out. Follow your heart. That's all I'm going to say.
Follow your heart.
Yeah.
And on that note, if you find yourself feeling really compelled by this idea of clothing insecurity and how can we help kids who are in this situation, you actually have a guide that can help others start a similar mission in their communities. Tell me a little bit more about that and where people can learn more.
Yes, so this has been like a dream of ours since the beginning. So we've been tracking all of the different things that we did, and the guide is really, if you are interested in learning about clothing insecurity and how to address this in your community, the guide is on our website, noteinthepocket.org. First tab, I think, is what we do, and then clothing insecurity will take you to a page that tells you more about it. I was lucky enough to be invited to do a TEDx to talk about what clothing insecurity is.
Go check that out.
So that is on there, and then at the bottom there's the free downloadable guide, and it'll tell you what we did at the early days. So nobody wants to walk into a 29,000 square foot facility that's serving 10,000 people and say, that's overwhelming, I can't get there. And you can, but maybe you won't, right? You're going to be where you are. What you need is, how do I start this now? How's the Susan Ryland home family ministry? Let's start there, even if I have more resources. So we just try to make it really easy. The beautiful part is we're also here. So you can call, you can email, and we're here as a resource to help anybody who has questions to get them started.
Awesome. So if you're interested in starting a clothing insecurity initiative, now you know where to look.
Great.
Thank you, Dallas.
Yes, thank you, Amber.
Dallas is one of the most impressive nonprofit leaders that I know, of course, and I'd love to hear what you thought of her story and her journey. What are some of the top lessons that you learned from listening to her share her experience starting and growing Note in the Pocket? Leave those in the comments below. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, I hope you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel for more content like this. Don't forget to visit my website, changemakercafe.com, where you can find more resources to help you in your social impact journey. Whether you're starting a nonprofit or fundraising or serving on a board of directors, there's something there for you that I hope will bring you value and help you out. I'm Amber Melanie Smith, and I'll see you next time. Bye.